Welcome everyone to Parenthood Connection. I'm so grateful to have you here. I'm Brooke Shapiro. For those who don't know me, I'm the founder of Sprinkles Parents. We're an education, activities, and resource community to families to help them thrive. That's my mission, to make parenting easier. I'm so grateful today to have all of you here. We have an amazing guest, Chloe from Honeycomb Labs, and I'm going to hand it over to her to do her introduction and then lead us through this conversation today.
Awesome. Thank you, Brooke. So I'm Chloe Sladden, and as Brooke mentioned, I'm the co-founder of Honeycomb, which is a parent collaboration app. Our mission is to give every parent a meaningful, supportive community while also lowering your parent workload. And we do it by helping parents parent collaboratively across families. So at the end, if people are interested in learning more about that, I'll do a demo and show you stuff. But the reason why we built this app is based on all this research and all of this insight we have around why parenting has gotten so hard and how to make it easier. And so that's what I want to focus on today is talk about how do we get to where we are right now and how do we get out of it. And so I've developed a playbook around how we rebuild parent communities, and I have a bunch of sort of provocative asks of schools, parents, and PTAs that I want to bounce off of you guys and have as a basis of discussion to see if they resonate, what they bring up, what's missing, and if they're helpful. So I'd really love this to be interactive. And obviously at any point, ask questions, put stuff in the chat, and I'm going to pause after I give you a little bit of background. I'm going to really pause and see if you guys are open to discussing some of the concepts around rebuilding parent community. Now we have too many people to go through and introduce everyone, but I'd love if a few of you brave souls are feeling a little extroverted, if you want to share a little bit about, we know a little bit about your kids. Feel free to tell us again your kids' ages, but where they go to school and where you live, just so we know if you're Bay Area or outside of the Bay Area. And then I have a question, and please try and answer it honestly. And I'm going to make you feel better about your answer, because I ask this of a lot of parents, which is, how in the last month, how often have you hosted another family inside your house? I mean, the adults and the kids. And then also, how often have you been hosted in somebody else's house in the past month? So again, try and, I'm going to share more information about that. But if anybody feels like jumping in, please tell us a little bit about yourself and how often you've been in other people's homes.
Okay, I'll go first. I'm Ashlyn. I'm from Redondo Beach, which is in Los Angeles, so I'm in SoCal. I have a kid in just started middle school and then a daughter in elementary school, so we're still full in it.
Mm-hmm.
I've probably hosted in my house once this month, like inside my house, sometimes like outside my house is
Yep.
something else. Um, and I haven't gone anywhere this month, but that's not, it's just been a busy month.
Yeah. Yeah, it's intense. Awesome. Thank you. Who else wants to jump in?
Go. My name is David. I'm in North Carolina. My kids are teenagers now,
Mm-hmm.
and but I live in a community that has lots of younger kids in it, and probably hosted once and been at someone's house with kids once in the last month.
Cool. Awesome. Anyone else want to jump in? While we're seeing if anyone else wants to jump in, what I'll share with you is that in all the different forums I've asked people about hosting, I would say the vast majority of families have not hosted in the past 4 to 5 months and have maybe gone over to someone's house once in 2 or 3 months, which is a big shift from sort of say 20, 30 years ago. And I've been trying to get at the root of what's going on there. And we're going to come back to this. But for instance, I'm, if you can't tell, super extroverted and love hosting. And so I've lived in 3 communities since having my kids. So San Francisco, Wanaka, New Zealand, which is a medium-sized town. And then now we live full-time in Bolinas, California. And in all places, my goal is to have like one family a week over, say 3 weeks out of the month. So 3 out of 4 weeks we're hosting someone and the whole family. And we often let the kids go watch a movie so we can have adult time. And I would say we get invited back at a rate of 1 out of every 8 to 10 invites. And so at first I was like, oh my God, there's something really wrong with us. We must be terrible. And then I found a few other extroverted people who, I was like, hey, how often do you get invites back? And they're like, yep, it's like a 1 to 10, 1 to 8 ratio maybe. So I think there's something in this parental stress and anxiety that we're feeling that gets to the very core of how we connect with each other and how intimate we're willing to be with each other. So we're going to talk more a little bit about that, but I think that's a pretty fascinating shift in how we connect. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Give me 1 second here.
Oh, I would love insights if you know into
Yeah.
why that's happening, because I don't think it's just with parents. I think
Yes, I think you're right.
there are people in this world who are the planners, and I'm a planner. So like
Mhm.
I do all this organization and I bring the kids together and blah, blah, blah. And then there's, for whatever reason, no judgment, like they're too busy or like something else. But like,
Yep.
why is that? Why are some people like, why is it one-sided?
Yes, I think that's a great question. I have theories, and in fact, and one of the things I'm working on with, how many here people here know about Jonathan Haidt and the Anxious Generation, or Emily Oster? Anybody, like, show of hands, familiar with these guys? So Jonathan Haidt and the Anxious Generation, I highly recommend looking at it because he's done a lot of research on why we have a kids' mental health crisis. Part of it he roots back to lack of community. But what's really fascinating about it is that it's been declining for many for like a generation or two, and I think it's tied intensely to social media and digital communities, that we've over rotated to this not realistic new culture where we have very fragile and they're not real connections in the digital space in many cases. Like, you can just leave a platform or close the laptop if you want to walk away from conflict, whereas in real life you have to engage, and we've lost that muscle of how to deal with conflict and difference, which used to be a very, it's always been part of life and how we connect with each other. But if you get out of practice, if that muscle gets weak, it feels incredibly anxiety producing to consider that. And now we live in a world of cancel culture and everyone's wrong all the time and loves to flame one another online. And so social connection suddenly feels fraught rather than rewarding.
Also, I feel like so many, is it okay if I chime in?
Please. Yes, of course.
I'm a room parent in my class, like similar to Erica, like that planner, and I try and get people to volunteer, and like people are just too busy like with their work jobs on a day to day just because of technology, right? Like you can never really be off work.
Right.
And just like they're just so focused on themselves sometimes, a lot of the parents, when I'm like, hey, can you do the school, do the Halloween party, you're not working, like it would be really grateful. Should be like the parent will be like, oh well, this is my year. Like I'm not taking anything on. I'm already too much. And I'm like, I'm so I think there's also some of that where people just don't want to do it anymore.
Yes. And we'll come back to that. So we're going to talk about PTAs and parent organizations, and a high level summary there. I think PTAs have lost or need to ideally refocus on parents. I mean, I've been a room parent, and everyone I know is like, never be a room parent. It's the most thankless job in America. And, we're all feeling overwhelmed. And what do PTAs ask us to do? Volunteer hours and give money. Those are two very draining things when you're actually, needing to put your own oxygen mask on first. So we'll talk more about, how to shift that and why are we getting, because that's true. We see it on Facebook groups all the time. Why is nobody jumping in? So we'll get to a diagnosis of that. So let's start with, why are we here? Why are we at this drained space? So how many of you are familiar with the Surgeon General's health advisory from last month? Okay, cool. So this was, all right. Many of you are, but this is like so important. So health advisories are reserved for major natural crises. So it's when there is an urgent health issue that the whole nation needs to focus on. So it's been reserved for things like smoking in the 60s, obesity in the 80s, right? Like, it's never been used for something that is both structural and cultural, like parenting. But Surgeon General Vivek Murthy published this advisory. He did this earlier in the year a year ago around isolation, loneliness in America. And he focused on kids' mental health and elders and people with disabilities. And I've been writing him for a year being like, there's an upstream cause of all of this isolation and loneliness, and it's the parents, because the parents are the ones that are raising the kids that become isolated. They become the elder generation that is disconnected. And if you don't focus on the parent phase, where we're meant to be building deep community, but we are no longer, that has so many downstream effects on everyone else's mental health. So clearly he's been reading all my emails. He never wrote back. And because this advisory was basically that summary of, it's not just us, which is why we even started Honeycomb, which is like, me and my co-founder were like, are we just parenting wrong? Why does it feel so hard? It is legitimately too stressful. Parenting has become too stressful. And in fact, half of parents say that most days they are so stressed out that it feels completely overwhelming, which is more than double the rate of the average adult. So, you can say America is pretty stressed in general right now. We feel polarized into, there's Ashland's point around, like, this is not just a parent thing, but like all communities are losing these connections. Absolutely. But I just say, like, my whole focus is, if we're going to focus on one place to have the biggest bang for the buck, it's parents. and especially parents of like 2 to 12-year-olds, because that's the forming and norming. It's the last major community forming and norming we do in our life. Unless you start playing pickleball, then you might have another opportunity. But that's it. Like, you have school, college, your first job, a couple other places, maybe your religious institution. But really, parenting is that last most important time to make friends that then give you the quality of life and the longevity that drives longevity for the rest of your life. So this is why I come back and really focus on this. And for those of us, I think part of parenting is we've over-rotated to focusing on kids. And if that's still your focus, I mean, I think like, look, let's put the spotlight on parents. We deserve to feel great. But if we really only care about kids, their health and well-being and their outcomes are directly related to the mental health of their parents. If you're not doing okay, your kid is not going to be doing okay. So again, if you're wondering, why do we have this mental health crisis in kids? And again, I highly recommend The Anxious Generation for the documentation of everything from suicide to suicide ideation to everything else, anxiety. Over 25% of Americans, I think we're at 30%, have anxiety that's so serious it needs not just not medication specifically, but treatment. By the way, there's great non-medication treatment for anxiety, which we could talk about separately. But it has become, this again, it's the upstream cause of a lot of these things. So what are the drivers of parental mental stress? This is from the Surgeon General. One of the biggest drivers for all mental health is poverty. We can't ignore that. Like, financial stuff matters a lot. And for those of us not in a poverty state, parenting and child rearing is so expensive now. This is a very obvious and common one. And this is one where policy needs to step in. But the other ones, time demands. So we spend twice the hours parenting compared to our parents. And this is why we have the vast majority of families, 73% of families with kids under 18 do not have a stay-at-home parent. So we went from the 60s and the 50s where, something like, it was actually higher. It was 80% or maybe it was 70% of families had a stay-at-home parent, usually the mom. We flipped that. The vast, vast, vast majority do not have a stay-at-home parent. So we've lost that person who's building community, doing all the kids stuff, doing all the logistics. It's now shared usually across 2 working parents. And at the same time, we've doubled the hours we spend on parenting and logistics. So the time, and then so that intensity is like kids need to be in after school activities and we need to be talking to them and reading them and The time demands of doing that is intense. We have a kid mental health crisis. So that plus we're much more aware of learning differences and challenges and spectrum, different ways of kids' neurology. And so we now have a lot more work to do to better support our kids, right? Safety. Our children are safer now in the real world than they have ever been. Kidnappings are incredibly rare. The predators have been, the sexual predators all are on Megan's list. Like, we have done so much work. All the data shows that the offline world is incredibly safe. The online world is where they all went, by the way. But we are living in a culture of fear. We have shifted to a fear-based parenting because of 24-hour news cycles that like to tell us all the scary stuff because we keep watching. And then some very real things that are psychologically damaging, like school shootings, right? I mean, it doesn't matter. It's so random. You always have this fear, even though it's very unlikely to happen. It's just this psychological mental load that makes it much harder to parent. Then, of course, technology has shifted radically. Our kids know more about it than us. How on earth are we as parents meant to fight back against social media not properly protecting our kids? It's a very hard, challenging thing our parents didn't have to deal with in the same level. TV, you could turn it off. You could unplug it, right? Your kids are going to find ways to social media or the internet, whether you want to or not. Then there's cultural pressures and your kid's future. Now, the kid's future stuff is like, do we have a good economy? Do we have the right government in place? Cultural pressures are things like social media telling us, should I be gentle parenting? Am I doing the right, thing? Have I dealt with my own stuff enough? Like, all the different input we get around parenting, much of which is wonderful, right? That we're all much better parents because of it. But a lot of it is also creating comparison and stress. And then the final driver is parental isolation and loneliness. And this is the piece that, of course, I'm focusing on, and all the bold ones here can be alleviated by having a strong parent community. Financial strain, that comes back to things like policies like paid leave, flexible workplace, federal support of childcare to make it less expensive. The children's future, that's, macroeconomic things, that's stuff that, we should all go vote, right? And run for offices and stuff. Everything else here, when you share parenting across families, whether it's carpooling or drop-off play dates, you reduce the time stress. The fear-based parenting comes from not talking about parenting with others, but hearing it from these outside sources that are economically designed to freak you out because you'll spend more time on their sites or watching their TV. So a lot of these things are things we can really solve with a stronger parent community. So that's why we focus on that so much. And really, for millennia, we have been designed to raise our children together. We are not meant to be doing this in our isolated family units. This is a very modern result of, it's modern life technology and capitalism. So let's talk a little bit, and then I'm almost done with the background here, about how did our parent communities get so brittle and fragile? And it's not just our parent communities, all of our in real life communities have been getting weak. And if you've heard of bowling alone, this has been studied for 20 or 30 years now, but it's accelerated a lot in the past 10 years thanks to COVID, social media, and this over rotation to digital communities. So I worked at Twitter early on. I was one of the earliest executives there. So I was part of building social media, and I know it has incredible power. And it's in its early days was a general force for good, right? So it's all about balance. Like, social media is not going away. It has incredible positive things. Digital community is incredibly important when you're trying to find people that you might not have access to locally. But it's this over rotation to letting it drive all of our sense of connection and communication. Because again, it's not the same as being in physical presence with somebody, building relationships, or dealing with conflict. And then intensive parenting. So I mentioned we parent double the hours, even though we have less hours to parent. And there's a whole bunch, there's a great daily episode with Clara Kane Miller from the New York Times yesterday that gives you this sort of history of how parenting has shifted in the past 20 or 30 years. That if you think about it, if we're spending all that time parenting and we're all working now, what did we give up? We gave up friendship, time with friends, social time, sleep, and time with spouse. So that's a great recipe for anxiety, not enough sleep, conflict with your spouse, and no time with friends. So now we are parenting in these predominantly isolated nuclear families, which feels right. And that's how America advertises and tells us we're supposed to do it, but it's actually not, and not particularly healthy. Okay, so how do we rebuild parental community? And this is the place where I'm really hoping you guys will jump in and have some debates with me. Our philosophy is schools are absolutely critical, specifically preschools through middle schools. By high school, it's going to be a lot harder to shift your community because kids have their own friends. At this point, parents have lost their energy to create community, although I'd love to hear from David to see if that's true with his teenagers in North Carolina. But schools in general are our last universal social structure. So we're a far less religious nation than we've ever been. Less than half of us even belong or affiliate with a religious entity, which means far, far, far less than half are even attending weekly services of any kind. So school, is the last place where on a day-to-day basis, we are in community. So I'm not the only one who thinks this. The Surgeon General and his advisory was like, he has a couple solutions, and a lot of it, he does looks at religious institutions to do this. It looks at neighborhood groups, but he says too, schools have to be a nexus of rebuilding parent community. This is absolutely critical. But, and again, we've done a lot of surveys on this, over 65% of schools don't even give out a parent directory. And most school families haven't even been in each other's homes, partially because they can't even get in touch, right? It's like in every school I've been in, I'm like, oh yeah, just write your number on a piece of paper and put it in your kid's backpack. And then 4 months later, I'm like, I pull out a piece of crumpled paper and somebody else's phone number is written on it. I'm like, that's how we're supposed to be connecting now. And we'll talk a little bit about why, like schools think of parents as chaos agents now. So it's understandable that they've been like, please, let's just not connect the parents. But we're literally shooting ourselves in the foot by moving away from each other rather than moving towards each other. So this is the playbook we've developed. That's all my sort of background and stuff. I'm going to pause here first just to see if there's questions about how we got here, if any of that resonates or doesn't resonate. Of course, these are averages. And then these are the 3 categories I want to chat about. Let me know which ones you're most interested in. Each one has sort of 3 suggestions that are slightly provocative about how do we get out of this situation? What do we all, because we all have to do stuff. At least this isn't us hoping for our government to pass policy, because we all know how hard that is. These are things we can literally do tomorrow or ask of our schools or PTAs to start doing tomorrow. So I'll jump into that next, but let me pause for a minute.
I think the parents part is probably, if anyone has any thoughts on, the parents part, I think probably the most helpful,
Mhm.
most interesting.
Yeah.
Since I'll share my story if that's
Yeah.
okay.
Yes,
Um,
please.
so my story, just really quick for those who don't know. So my son is autistic. And so in the school, he hit another girl because she wasn't responding to him. And he got really, really frustrated. And so then and we use Constella. And so the parents started like messaging me on Constella, threatening me. And then like saying they're gonna, you need to teach my son better not to hit girls. And I need to like be more engaged in his life. And what am I gonna do? And we need to, and like, I'm like, I wasn't there, like I didn't even get a chance to know his side of the story. I guess the mom was there because it was like before drop off and I don't do drop offs because I work. So anyway, so I think that's like Chloe was saying, the agents of chaos. So the school, I know OUSD where I am is going to remove Consella so we can't communicate to each other because parents, because there's, I think you said, Chloe, you taught me that there's like 5% of parents that just
Yeah.
like they're working full-time parents, they're busy and they feel like they need to protect their daughter, and that's how they help their daughter by, that protection of her, which is understandable community, but like parents don't know how to have that conflict. Like, would that family, pick up a phone and call me, or would they have figured out who to talk to me about? Like, they don't have that. They're just so scared. They don't know who I am. They don't know if my son is racist. They were like, maybe your son is a racist, or maybe your son is like misogynist. And I'm like,
Mhm.
you know,
What is
he's
he?
5
5,
and he
6?
is
Right.
learning to,
Yeah.
so I think it's just having parents connect, just want to talk about that for all of us, because I think that could help.
Yeah.
And Erica, I saw you went off mute. I don't know if you have something to add.
Sorry, I'm also at work, so that's why I'm kind of hidden here. I would just, to piggyback off of that, my kid's now in kindergarten, but when he was in preschool, he would have dust ups pretty regularly. And of course I had my own doubts and issues, like I'm not a good enough mom, or,
Mm.
I'm not doing a good job parenting, and that's why he's having all these problems. But one of the things that really just kind of impacted me was the way his teachers and stuff they would say like, well, he can't be here, he's too dangerous. And,
Mm.
and they would write these things on these apps. And, and I just thought, yeah, he's 4 years old, he's 3 years old, he's not
Mm.
dangerous,
Mm.
he's just, has, different needs in terms of how he communicates. And we ended up getting, some therapy for him, which helped a lot.
Oh, that's great.
But it was like they were so immediate to
Mhm.
blame him. And
Mhm.
and then I started to feel like, well, is this how everybody feels about me and my son? And is this, are
Mhm.
parents saying this about my kid? And so, I just regressed. I just decided like, I tried to avoid the school, the situation,
Mhm.
and just kind of
Yep.
hide.
Yep.
I if there were birthday parties, I wouldn't, I just didn't
Oh.
want to be in that situation because I
Mm.
felt like I was being judged.
Yep.
Now my kid is in a different community in school. We also use Constella. But it's almost like it makes your head spin. There's so many groups for anything, everything, whatever your kid is into. They don't use that same language about the children.
Mm.
Kids aren't the problem.
Mhm.
They, need support or whatever it is. So if your kid has an issue, how can we support them? What can we do?
Mm.
Regardless of what the kid is going through. And so that makes me feel a lot better because number one, it's not just my kid. So it's not
Mhm.
like I'm just the over here bad, terrible parent, boo.
Mhm.
It's like, oh, how can we support? How can we do this? So, um, a little bit of a flip there. But the other thing I was going to mention is, kind of going to that isolation. Um, I probably read this on social media or something, and it was kind of, from a younger generation, and they were saying, well, if you're talking to your friends or whatever, and you're telling them all your problems, then ultimately what you're doing is trauma dumping. And
Mm.
so you're not, that's a bad thing to do, to have a
Mm.
conversation where you're talking about all your problems. And I'm thinking, well, geez, I don't, I'm always looking for venting, and
Yeah.
things like that. So So that's also changed how I communicate with other people, because I'm like, make it positive. Don't say anything negative. Don't say anything, keep that for your inner circle, right? Like, and so, and like to that
But we don't
extent,
have
I
inner circles anymore.
like my mom and one friend that I talk to, that's it.
Yeah.
Because I just don't want to be trauma dumping on anybody. What can you say in circles anymore?
Yeah.
So, and I think you really kind of talked about that a lot in terms of how social media has changed how we interact. And there's a fear there, because I don't want to be, that guy, right? So
a lot of second guessing.
So, I'm hoping that a lot of things will be changing for me in this new space, because I have felt very isolated and just kind of going through whatever it is I'm going through on my own without any, at least not in the school. So like, my girlfriends or, people that I know, but I don't really push that out to, because a lot of the parents that I'm meeting, I don't know them. They aren't friends that I picked. Our kids go to school together. So we're kind of put in this situation together, but maybe we wouldn't be friends otherwise. And so I'm not going to do that, because I don't want to say, so
thank you, Erica, for sharing. And David, I see your hand up. I just want to make, thanks for sharing. There's a lot there. One quick question, then one comment. What is the nature of the school that you're in now? Is it a public school, or did you pick a special school?
It's public school, and it's Beach Elementary. It's in Piedmont.
Okay.
And so that, and it's been a really good, but I'll tell you that there's also a lot of funding that the parents have to give to make up for any deficits. So I don't know if that's all the schools.
Well, I'm glad you finally found a space that is more supportive. One comment on these are my kids' friends. These aren't necessarily the people I would pick. So this is something I think we've sort of lost, because we've been losing community for 30 years. I don't know if we even saw it with our parents necessarily, but community is not about friendship. It's about connecting with the people that you need to rely on because you are in the same local space. And it's really, hopefully friendship comes out of community. That's of course a really wonderful, important part. We all need deep friendship. But when I talk about community, it's not friendship. It's a sense of well-being that when you send your kid out to the store at age 6 and they fall over and scrape their knee and you're not around, that another adult is going to step in and make sure they're okay. And you don't have to be friends with them, but you need to feel connected enough that they feel responsibility for everyone in their community. And we feel that responsibility when we find ways to bond despite friendship and because we happen to be together. And so I think it's like a new language to us to be like, oh, right, I should be curious about and connected to, and even the people I disagree with, which is an incredibly important muscle to build, is like how to have respectful bonds with people you feel very different from politically or have different, child rearing philosophies with. You have to find ways to connect with them. You don't have to send your kid for a sleepover at their house if you have different parenting values. That's fine. You can make those choices, but you need to find a way to connect, because without that, that's where we get to this mental health crisis of feeling completely alone in everything. And then we don't have the language to deal with conflict, like, oh, it's your kid's fault, or you must be parenting them wrong. We become very influenced by these bigger than life voices on social media because we don't feel like, oh no, I'm safe in my community. I'm connected. I have conflicts, but we get through them, and sometimes we don't get through them. That's also fine. But I have enough connections that I know what the real world is and what my value is. So I just encourage us all to think about, like, what is community separate from friendship? All right, David, thank you for your patience.
Oh, no worries. And thank you for that definition of community, because I was thinking of more of a close-knit, the friendship thing. So that's really great. Just thinking of, no, it's just the people you rely on. These are just observations. So again, I'll date myself. I grew up in the 70s and 80s.
Me too.
So my mom was at home, when I came home from school. And then later in life, she ended up getting a job. So I was a latchkey kid. But I don't remember like my school or even the parents giving me that sense of community. Like as a kid, like I just felt like I had it. Like I don't know what things were there that they did. I just felt like we didn't have things to pull us away from the community like we do today, all the digital stuff. So like, for example, like, I would go over to someone's house and we would play Atari, again, dating myself, right? But today, even my 2 kids, when they play video games together, they'll be in their own rooms playing the same game. They're not even in the same room together.
That's
And
right.
so that, the technology just completely doesn't give us the ability
Absolutely.
to come together. So, and then the last observation I'll make, sort of culture, and maybe this has to go with the parents, as us all trying to be super parents, being on top of things. But I like to have a rule that, you can come over to my house anytime you want to, just don't judge what it looks like.
Yes.
Because if
Yes.
if you if you, if it was a requirement for your house to be in order for someone to come over, no one would ever come over to my house, and vice versa. And so I think that's part of it. And my fiance is Asian. She just got back from Asia, and her family lives in, she calls it the country, but it's kind of the suburbs now. And she's like, and it's near Shanghai. And she's like, it's so different there because people still have this old way where people in her neighborhood, they just come in the door. They just come in,
Yep.
right? Unannounced. They don't
Yep.
call and say, hey, is it okay if I come over? They just come over and come in. And she's like, it's so great that they still do that. Where in the city, no one
No one
does
does
that.
that.
So it'd be great if we could kind of get back to that.
That's
Hey,
great.
just come over. Like, just come over.
Yes. Welcome. By the way, I just read about this thing called the pink flamingo. Somebody put a giant blow up pink flamingo in their yard, and they told everyone in the neighborhood, when the pink flamingo is out, it means please just come in. So Friday afternoons, they put the pink flamingo out, and they thought nobody was going to show up, but like 8 neighbors came over the first time. And now they do it once a month, and other people start doing it, and they've never had less than like 12 other people in their house. Because I think we do need these clever tools to say we are a multicultural society. We come from different environments. We have different needs and different, So I love that idea of how do we put the flag up to say please. And David, you're right. We didn't think about, this is why this is so interesting to me. Nobody sat down in the 60s and said, okay, how do I build a robust community for my kids so that they have this play-based childhood where they can have independence and run around? And Dr. Haidt calls it the loss of parent solidarity. That in the 60s and 70s, we trusted the other adults to look out, or adult solidarity to look out for our kids. We didn't have to be with them all the time. We've lost that because of fear-based parenting, multiculturalism, where we just don't always know. We might get really upset with somebody for disciplining somebody when we're suddenly not in a disciplining mode or whatever it is. And so we've lost and haven't figured out how to come back together. And it was mostly the stay-at-home moms across the socioeconomic spectrum, truly, across the socioeconomic spectrum, who were building community. It was part of their job. It wasn't articulated like much of caregiving. We don't value it. We don't articulate it. We don't study it. We don't pay for it very much, right? So it's like, how do we bring all of those things? That's what I'm trying to kind of articulate now is, what are those principles that gave us not a perfect childhood? There were plenty of other issues going on, but that's the piece we want to pull back and rely on again. So to your very point, one of the first things and asks I have of parents is have people over. And I'd love to hear other people's feeling and reaction when I say open your doors and start with something small once a month, just tea. Like I understand hosting a family can cost money, right? Like I'm not like, don't go buy tuna, make a beautiful tuna steak for God's sakes, right? Open a bottle of wine. I've had people over who don't drink at all. And so I always make sure I have things that are non-alcoholic. I always, you don't know, right? We all have different things. So it is awkward figuring out who this person is. I have families over who speak almost no English. So we're almost doing, our community is like 25% Spanish dominant speaking. And those are hard. Like those are, but our kids are friends and I'm committed to trying to connect with them. I don't get invited back because often, somebody might, just not have enough space in their home or they live in a trailer. But all these things are worth it because we smile when we see each other. We have these little connections. So obviously this is easy for me. I'm an extrovert. And so what I'm trying to do, and I'd love to hear from people who are not extroverts, where I've seen it trigger people a little bit, where it's like, I don't want people in my house. But if we don't have people in our house, it used to be normal to know exactly what everyone's living rooms look like in your neighborhood. I have been in very few of the houses in my neighborhood. I live in a rural environment, so it shouldn't, but somewhat like, there's like 20 houses around me, almost none of them. And that's not okay, right? Like we can't build trust to be able to carpool and, share parenting and do drop-off play dates if we don't actually feel like we can be intimate. And intimate doesn't mean, again, friendship or alignment or agreement. It just means, I've seen you in your house and I've had enough space and time with you that maybe I bring up, that tough point about, hey, my kid, I know like he pushes a lot and he's really struggling and I feel really stressed about it. I don't know. Have you ever had to deal with that? Right? It's like, it's not It's not therapy dumping, I don't think. It's like, it's asking one another for advice and being vulnerable. So anyhow, I'll stop talking. How does this make people feel? And what would help you get more comfortable with this? This is like, how do we normalize messy homes? Like, I try very hard not to clean up. It's hard for me not to clean up before people come over because I really want to, but I try not to. So tell me.
I was gonna say, I think Dan really hit, or David, sorry, I think he really hit the nail on the head. I think a lot of people have this need for everything to look perfect.
Yeah.
I let go of it COVID or before, and I finally just said, you know what? I live in a dump. Like there's fingerprints on the walls, but this is the house of happiness. There's animals running around, there's children, and I'll figure it out when the kids have stopped putting their hands on the walls. And so I have people over and I'm just like, welcome to the house of mess. Like, don't care, come on in. But I think more people need to do that. And I go into other people's homes and I feel terrible because everything looks perfect all the time. And I'm like, you know what? Can't be that person.
Yep. Yep.
I also think it's just like parents are just so overloaded. Like, I think that sometimes the thought of like having to host again is like, okay, I've got to organize the food. I've got to like, get people together, and like, you know, the amount of stuff coming out of the schools of like, my kid has to wear red today. She needs this. And I'm like, if I had one, everybody's always like, oh, please join the PTA. And I'm like, no, you don't want me on the PTA because I will rip that whole place down. I was like, I volunteer and I run the garden, but no more of this dress up garbage, like all this stuff that I have to put on my calendar. And my daughter is upset if something gets missed, right? And like, she's 6. I can't expect her to figure it out for herself.
That's right. That's right.
So I just think parents are overloaded.
Absolutely.
And I think it's not just a matter of parents saying like, open your doors, have people come in. It's like, how do we systematically across all the pieces of society, be it work, be it schools, take stuff off our plates? We are drowning.
Exactly. So, and keep that thought, because we're going to get to the schools. I think the schools need to hear that. That's also why we built Honeycomb, is to try and suck all those emails in, all those to-dos and dates, so you don't ever have to add them to a calendar. We put them in a shared calendar that anybody in the community can edit and add to. We would send you the reminders like you have a permission slip due tomorrow. But to your point, we need to also go tell the schools, take it down a notch, and to the PTAs. You know, is Spirit Day really, like, you know, go back to the parents. What did the parents need? And I bet most of them are going to say, please stop with all the spirit weeks, or just one spirit day, or not the crazy one where it's like, wear your favorite camping outfit or something that none of us have access to. We need to all agree culturally. And again, this is why we can do it. We can create allies who agree with you. And then you go into that PTA meeting, have them over for a cup of tea. You know, I love that you say, this is a house of mess, but it's a house of happiness. Like, we've got to all say that a lot more loudly. Like, I don't know if you guys have seen the menopause shirts that have been going around. Menopause is hot. Again, it's like, how do we take it's such a great, hilarious, you know, perfect, like, cultural shift. This thing we don't talk about, we don't acknowledge, that we haven't properly addressed medically. Now it's suddenly like, okay, spotlight it. So this is one of those things, I think the more that people say it out loud, and so you're not just like embarrassed about your house, you say, welcome to my house. I have lots of fingerprints everywhere because I have a bunch of kids and I'm excited to hang out with you. And, you know, this is how I do it, right? Like, just normalize it. I'm going to keep going, but anyone else jump in or raise your hand. Actually, let me go back. So one thing is balance. Some of us, so I had to talk to a bunch of other people, be like, I think I've heard people say, I'm going to stop asking people over because they never get asked back. Or we can't find a date, and so we give up. I'm like, don't give up. Like, some people, you know, coach Little League or give money to the PTA. Everyone has different ways of building community. If you can be that person, because there aren't going to be that many of us who can host people, and again, keep it simple, model it being messy, simple, boxed mac and cheese, ask people to bring, you know, beer over or sparkling water, whatever it is. Keep doing it. Think of it as your very vital public service, especially if you broaden it, not just to the people you are drawn to, but the people your kid fights with at school. Like, I guarantee you, this is the #1 trick. If you have 2 kids who are fighting, invite that family over and then model for those children how you connect with their parents. That's how they learn. They don't learn because we say, don't push, or how do you think that makes them feel? They watch by watching us bond with others and then navigate, so our kids kind of don't get along so well. What do you think that's about? They will absorb all of that. So don't give up on it. It needs to eventually become more balanced than it is now, but it's never going to be balanced. And this is the thing I'm struggling to articulate. For every bit of energy you put into the community, you are lifting everyone's boats, including your own. You're not going to see it fully back, right? You're not going to get 10 more invites back necessarily, but trust me, in ways that you can't see and feel, your kid will be looked out for or will have a better experience because your community is stronger. And then the next one, and this is really important, and Brooke has mentioned this, we're going to have conflict. We're under stress, we're working hard, everyone expects a lot. Our kids are more complex than ever. Technology makes life more complex than ever. We're going to get in fights. We're going to have conflict. We're going to be pissed with each other. 90% of the time, and the 10% where this is not the case, this is where schools need to help us. If you bring that challenge up in person, you will have a more productive conversation where you'll probably end up actually feeling more aligned with that person than you did before, even though it was scary or a little bit hard. So this is why they've taken away our right to connect at schools, because like they're taking away Constello in Oakland because parents are freaking out on it. That 5% of parents, and we're all stressed. Like I've said things inappropriate, like like we've all done it, right? So I'm not trying to call out 5% for being bad parents. They're under stress. They have trauma in their background, or they're not getting the support they need. No one's paying attention to parents, and they're using digital technology inappropriately. So one of our rules with Honeycomb is, yes, we have chat. Please do not use Honeycomb to figure out conflict. The whole point is it's a local community app, and our number one mission is to get you to spend more time in real life together, not time in our app. The app is a facilitation for carpooling and drop-off play dates, and most importantly, time spent in life. So, connect with that parent online and say, hey, our kids are fighting, or I hear that, your kid might have said something pretty tough. Can we talk about this in person? Can I call you? But don't try and then present the issue online through an email, through a text, and sort it out that way. And so, schools have lots of examples, even pre-COVID and then during COVID, of parents freaking out at teachers and administrators. And, these guys don't get paid enough and their jobs are hard. And it's just, they are pulling us away because of that behavior. So how does this feel? Like, do you guys agree with the statement? Do you think it's not realistic because we'd have to prioritize? It takes a lot more time, right, to sort something out in person. But yeah, I'd love some responses.
Well, I'll just say that the conflict, taking it offline, I think that's a great strategy, because it's so easy to hide behind a phone and say something. So definitely taking it to the teacher or to a parent, I think makes a lot of sense, because you're going to be much more balanced in your conversation if you're talking to someone face to face.
Has anyone had a really negative experience trying to handle conflict in person? I'm sure it has happened because, some people are just really hard to deal with.
I think sometimes I can just speak for my partner, is like, it's personal. Like we've all taken it personally. Like I don't think our parents, when they had kids, took anything personally, how their kids acted as much. You know what I mean? Because it was kind of like arm's length. But now if your kids does something, like it feels so personal. Like Erica saying, like, I'm the bad parent. Like someone hit my kid. Oh my gosh, this is personal. It's like they hit me.
Right. They hit me.
And we're like so bonded now, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's, the hard part is just like everyone's taking it so personal because we're putting so much more time into parenting. Yeah.
And we don't have our communities around us. So like we need to process our own feelings. Like being a parent, as we all know, it's like if you weren't, aware of all of your shortcomings or challenges before, my God, the kids are a mirror, right? For everything you need to work on, if you're willing to look. And so it's intense, right? It's super intense. And if you don't have other parents, like the best parenting advice and sort of therapy I've ever had is through friends and community members, just where I just am like, I'm at my wit's end, or I don't know how to deal with this, or how have you dealt with that? And then sharing what I learned. So my kids have, there's a fair bit of anxiety in my kids, and I've learned about exposure therapy, which changed our family. And it was really hard to do. And now whenever I see that, I'm like, hey, FYI, like, if this is what might be going on in your family, I've been through it if you want to talk about it. And it's a great bonding moment. Just like we learn to parent, and they've done studies to show the best parents, the strongest parenting techniques are parents with strong social connections, because we learn from each other, right? You know, you can read a book, but is it really going to be practiced? And then you watch, right? How often have you seen a parent do something, you're like, ooh, that was good, or as much, or ooh, I'm not going to do that, right? Like that's how we learn, right? So it's so critical. A few more things. I'm just go through the schools and the PTAs because I know we're almost at time, but I'd love your feedback on these three things that we think schools should commit to and we should be asking our schools for. So one is we have a right to connect. If we commit to not using Constella to, you know, harass one another, we have to be able to be in touch with each other, and not just the kids in our classroom, but across the school. And, you know, they keep saying, well, privacy, we're not allowed to. It's bullshit. I've looked up the law in California, which is one of the most privacy protected states. Parents have a right to opt out of sharing their contact information with the school. They do not have to opt in. So the schools are using that as a shield, because the real issue is you guys are crazy and 5% of you are going to make our lives miserable and we don't have the resources to deal with it. So again, I feel for them. I get it, but this is not the solution. We must be able to connect. So that's where we start. And then we say, okay, look, your parents need an oxygen mask. We have spent how many billions of dollars on social emotional learning for our kids, but they go home and see parents on their screen, or parents that are stressed out, or parents who don't, you know, they're not modeling, like we all haven't been doing this enough, how to deal with conflict with each other. And so that's a leaky bucket, you know, like they're really starting to question all the social emotional investment because they, you know, we live in an ecosystem. And then the other piece, and this is again where I'm happy to, like, we should also be getting more resources for our schools. I'm not trying to put more work on their already overloaded plate. This needs to come with federal, state, and local resources. But they should be the center point of saying, okay, job number one here is getting the parents together. Everything gets easier when the parents can rely on each other, where they can learn how to sort things out together versus coming to the teachers, right? Like it's fine to come to your teacher if you're feeling scared. Like I think it is inappropriate for families to have to figure out really tough stuff together, because not all families are equipped. It's going to be a negative experience. But the school needs to facilitate, provide resources, teach us how to deal with conflict. You know, like we need to relearn some of this stuff. We need some of our own parenting again, basically. And part of that is the school being committed to knowing what is the working schedule of my families. They should accept and assume that it's mostly dual income families, even if it's part-time work, not like we still build school like there's a stay-at-home parent. They should ask, this is something my school did the other year after some pushing, they should ask for people's work schedule, because you'll have some people who work weekends or nights or do overnight shifts, right? And often that will break down around cultural lines. So if you don't want to leave people out because you're like, oh, everyone can make 6 p.m. or everyone can make 9 a.m., you're probably going to have to do a mix and match and do the same stuff twice to hit most people. And you should always provide childcare. Otherwise, you're sidelining a dad often, or a single parent, and you're not allowing this to be a team effort. So it takes coordination. Like you have to send surveys out. You have to know how to be in touch with your parents. You have to get the parents to want to engage. But if you said, instead of like, come and learn about algebra and how we're going to teach your kids social emotional, it's like, instead it's like, come because we want to connect with you and have you connect with each other and learn what you need. The school's a resource for you too. If you don't feel good, your kids are not going to be able to show up and learn. And then for PTAs and parent organizations, I think we've lost, like, you know, I said I was a room parent. I love we don't even have a PTA at my school, but we have a foundation, which is great. But again, their whole focus is raising money to be able to provide scholarships for after school stuff. Super important. But everyone said in my school, like, oh yeah, there's never been a strong parent community. They're sort of anti-institution. I got the vast majority of parents together just by saying, come hang out for coffee on a Sunday morning. Let's do one Saturday and one Sunday morning. Because again, I know I can't yell at people at church. I'll miss a bunch of our community. Let's have somebody come translate into Spanish. But like, people want to connect. You just need to make it appealing, and not about, I'm asking you to volunteer or I need you to, like, you know, relive homework nightmares. First, start with parents. So I think PTAs need to really recenter on parents first. You aren't going to get parents volunteering or engaging if you aren't first meeting their needs. And how do you know what they care about? Like, first and foremost, PTAs should be about what do parents need and what do they care about? And then great, awesome, you care about school lunch. Can you spend a little time working on that with us? So this kind of idea of like, we put it all into the teachers and the kids. but not ourselves. Getting to 50-50 representation, valuing mom's time as much as dad's time. And also just sort of part of this is saying, let's stop asking for so much volunteer time if we don't have it. Let's shift that. Like, I think we need to go back to basics and first make sure parents feel engaged with us and then see what they want to spend their time on. And make sure that's what we're building around. And then prioritizing whole family communication. Like, and I know this happens on all quarters where moms start a WhatsApp group or a text thread and leave the dads out. And that's fine to have a mom's group, but that can't be the official or common communication for the grade or for the families. And same thing for the love of God, schools and PTAs. And they're getting much better about this, but like, and it's very clumsy to say, okay, let's put every single person on a text thread or every single person in an email, which is why with Honeycomb, we focus on the family as the essential account. So every account is a family that then has adult members and children. The children don't have access because we don't want kids using the app, but each parent has equal access to the app. They all see all the same stuff. So nobody has to guess who's the primary parent. Like, should I be texting the mom or the dad or both? It just happens that way. So these are just sort of the beginning. This is a playbook I will send out with Brooke's support. We have a whole playbook that goes into details around all 9 of these and even shows examples of how to center on parents, how to set up like, a parent evening with childcare, so parents can just connect first. So we're trying to really build up like some stuff that you can easily cut and paste or adapt to it, and use it in your own communities. And I would love now, or if you want to send me an email or anything, any feedback on this, which are the pieces that felt most useful, which pieces might not have resonated, how much more detail you want to get this stuff done. I would love to hear all of it.
So I would just say one thing, just to kind of piggyback on what you said. So one of my toxic traits is I can't remember anybody's name. And, but I'll remember your kid, like everything about your kid. I'll know their favorite color, know their, and so when my kid first started preschool, I couldn't get a list, or if I would ask, it was always felt like, oh, I was bothering the school if I was asking. So I made my own chart, and I was putting the kids, I made my own spreadsheet, and then my son shifted and it was new school, so I just kind of gave it up. And then I was like realizing, I don't remember anybody's name. I don't know how to, and it felt really awkward. And I just, and then there's, with my other son, his room parents and whatever, they've kind of taken that on and they've made that something so that you can go to a chart and find the name of it. So you're not embarrassed of it, and that's just a horror. Like, to me, I'm just always so embarrassed that.
But that's normal. Like, everyone.
Well, I think so.
Yeah,
but
it's totally normal.
It just created this kind of thing. So I think you're right, kind of coming in and making sure everybody has access to that information constantly makes it easy to try.
Yes. So at least start with a directory. I'm just showing you my Honeycomb for Bolinas for the local public school here. But so what we do is we say, okay, we need a visual directory. You need to be able to see everybody in the family so you can remember not just the kids' names, but what's the mom's name again, right? So the idea is you should be able to put faces to names. You should be able to be in touch with the whole family, and you should have a visual representation of, who you're in community with, right? Like, I'm constantly using this to, I've been in this community for many years now. I'm still kind of, oh, here's a new family. I'm like, okay, right. What's the dad's name again? Okay, cool. Michael. So, starting with a basic directory. And then in our case, we add layers of privacy here if you want them, because I do recognize people have different needs. I share all my information because, it's a small community, but if I wanted to, I can, in each of these, you can decide I'm only going to give approximate, or I'm not going to have any of my location information in. I will or will not share emails and phone numbers, but you still are able to have connection. You don't have to give up connection because you're scared of privacy, or you do want some sort of control. So you're still always connected and have community through Honeycomb, but you have control over how much you share. And then one more thing I just want to show you, and then I'll just make sure everyone can jump off if they want to. Back to that workload and all the different stuff we, are asked to do for schools. We have we get you to auto forward your school emails, and we extract whether it's Parent Square or Remind. You can have it integrate with Honeycomb. So all of those dates are being automatically extracted by our Worker Bee, which is our AI community buddy, into Honeycomb, into a shared calendar. So every single one of these things, like there's a volleyball game this afternoon, there's a field trip on Monday, all of that gets pulled into here with all the details automatically and shared across your classroom and your school. So you don't have to keep track of all this stuff. And then it makes it really easy to have a conversation around these things because you're connected with everyone. You can make group chats, you can do, we have a whole thing around there just for volleyball, and another one for our soccer team. So you can see all the conversations we have around each thing. We put dates in for the games, so we're all able to be in touch and coordinated. So there are tools, I think, that can help, like, we're trying to design, what are those barriers? I don't know who the other families are. I can't remember people's names. I don't know who the primary parent is. God, I'm overwhelmed by the emails. I'd love to do a carpool, but I don't even know who's going to go to the same event. Like all those things, if we can coordinate more around schedule and see each other as families, then I think our theory is it makes it a lot easier to then do collaborative parenting and take some of this pressure off each other. All right,
Great.
I know we're at time. So if anybody needs to jump, please jump and don't feel rude. If anybody wants to stay and chat or learn more about Honeycomb or give me feedback, I will happily stay on for as long as you want.
Thanks, Chloe. Appreciate you bringing this together.
Yeah.
Thank
guys.
you. Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you. I got to jump off. Thank you. This was very helpful.
Yes, awesome.
Thank you so much, Chloe, and thank you everyone for joining. This was amazing. I put in the chat how you can download Honeycomb, or if you want to get in contact with Chloe, there's more information. If anyone's here in the Bay Area, we're doing a showing of Show Her the Money for Sprinkles too. It's so important that women founders are getting funding, so that the way they can make all these community building apps and make all these great companies and help our community more. So if anyone's there, welcome to Sprinkles Parents next event. And again, thank you so much. I'll be recording this, so you'll get an email with all the information. Have an amazing day. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Thanks. Thank you.